Welcome in, everybody. It is Backstretch Banter on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio Channel 90. I'm Chris Childers. Great to be back with you this week. Not the greatest of spirits, as RFK is no longer a contender in the playoff run right now. Brad got eliminated this weekend. He finished 26th at Bristol, so he will not advance to the round of 12. Buescher finished 14th, and he didn't make the playoffs. But as we talked about last week with Mr. Graves, you know what? You make the most of the consolation prizes, and winning a couple of weeks ago at Watkins Glen was pretty damn cool. So definitely still plenty to race for. We have a great couple of guests today on the show. Our first one I'm really eager to talk to because the sport has changed so much from his perspective of what he does in just the last, handful of years. So we'll get into it. And he's with us right now. Kevin Kidd is our guest, who's the director of software and analytics for RFK Racing. I gotta believe 20, 30 years ago, there was no director of software and analytics with any race team. You just went out there and raced. But Kevin, it's good to talk to you, man. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Doing very well today. Glad to be here and glad to talk software and analytics with you guys.
I'm really excited about it because technology is such a huge part of this sport, and it keeps changing. It keeps developing, and I think that's going to be a part of this conversation that'll be interesting as well. Where's it going to go, right? Because it's changed so much here in recent history. But, I'm curious, and we'll get into Bristol here in a minute and what happened, and certainly we're not thrilled with the results and would have loved to have been still competing for a championship. But when did analytics start to enter in as we know them today? I'm sure there was always some level of data that you looked at, but to the point where you can really kind of make decisions based on certain data, at least it can lead you into certain, comfortable path of making a decision. When did this become the norm in NASCAR?
I think the answer here is going to surprise you. I can think back in my career, and I've been around maybe a long time, which means I've got a few gray hairs for the remaining hairs that I do have. So I've seen the sport, transition, really since 2000. And sure. I would say the first time that I saw anything about analytics at any high level was probably around 2006, 2007, 2008, somewhere in that range. Team I was working with at the time, fairly progressive, forward-thinking team. We were actually with an OEM who's no longer in the sport, and that OEM, along with the team I was at, we contracted out the services of a third-party analytics group. And everything was pretty rough and crude, and I think everybody was still just trying to find their way at that point. But it's really when I look back on it and think that analytics was born into the sport. Since that time, obviously, it's come a long, long way, and we're doing things today that I don't think any of us could actually have ever imagined 20 years ago. But that's kind of the nature of development, right?
Absolutely. So 20 years, and the sport's been around a long time. So 20 years is still pretty young to have this new form of looking at a race and breaking down data, and it just keeps changing by the day. Yeah. Give us some insight here. Give us some, inside baseball. What was the analytic situation like 20 years ago, and what is it? How much more valuable and fine-tuned are the numbers, I should say, over the last 2 decades?
Back when it started, it was largely about just having a good timing and scoring program and being able to consume the data about what was going on in the race, who had fast lap times, who didn't, and really how to present that data in a way that had never been done before. Really basic stuff, like we're not curing cancer here 20 years ago. I think as it has evolved, certainly probably the thing that has evolved the most is just the accessibility of the data that we're actually allowed to consume. Over time, if you rewind the clock 20 years ago, literally the only data that was available was just like that raw timing signal from the cars, and there's only so far you can take that. There's plenty of things you can do, but you can only go so far. And since that time, we've just been able to get our hands on more and more data, most of which is NASCAR kind of changing their philosophy of what the teams are allowed to consume and how that's delivered. But as it has evolved, we've certainly had to evolve with it. And really, I would think, what I should say here is that the onset of current and modern day analytics in NASCAR is really, precipitated from, our collection of more and more data. That's what drives the whole thing. And with that additional data comes additional resources that you throw at it to be able to do something with it.
It really is something that has developed a lot in the last, several years. You mentioned 20 years ago, you're looking at, those times, and nowadays there's so many more nuances, programs, technology, things you're looking at that really can go into helping make good decisions for a race team. How would you broadly define NASCAR analytics? I come from the world of football, and I do college football. I've done it for the last 20 years, every day on Sirius XM. And we talk analytics all the time, but a lot of it has to do with, what do you call on third down when the score is, 20-17, or what do the numbers say about this, that, and the other? And to me, I get the value of it, but it also pisses me off. And I'll tell you why, because a lot of the sport to me is still feel. You have to feel the situation. Where am I? What am I doing? What's happening around me? What are the variables that maybe this data is not going to tell me? So with all of that said, there is a value to hard numbers that don't lie. So how would you define NASCAR analytics?
Not much different than where a lot of the other sports are at. Modern day NASCAR, if you think about what it is, we all, in a sense, have the same race car. The Gen 7 car, the next gen car, I should say, is kind of leveled the playing field. We all have the same chassis. We all have the same aero performance, so on and so forth. And so, my view of modern day NASCAR is that really the wins and the losses are defined by stacking together thousands, quite literally thousands of decisions throughout the course of several weeks of preparing for a race. Who can get more of those decisions right versus wrong? That generally puts you into a category where you're capable of winning the race. If you can be high on that scoreboard of getting decisions more right than wrong, you'll at least have a chance. Now, there's things like driver performance, pit crew performance, lightning strikes, whatever, that alter the finish of a race. But to even have a chance, you've got to make all these decisions correct along the way. And so it's really a game of optimization, making those correct decisions, giving yourself a chance. And then when you're in the heat of the battle, when you're running that race, these days, as you said, you got to have that mix of sort of gut feel and, hey, I've been in this situation before, I know what's worked in the past, so on and so forth. But it has to be complemented with good analytical strategic thinking. And if you don't have a mix of those two things, if you're too lopsided one way or the other, you're going to get screwed up. And I think we see that in NFL and college football.
Every weekend.
Yeah, you've got both sides of the extremes, and it's the teams that can figure out how to live in the middle and kind of pull both sides of that together. Those are the ones that are successful.
I think using it as a healthy tool is the best way to look at it, right? I mean, you still got it, like in football, you got to run, jump, tackle, pass, catch. But if you have, a healthy tool to say this is the good decision, then you could make a better decision. Yeah, I would imagine that's what happens in NASCAR.
It is. I mean, look, technology has not advanced, despite what you read in the newspapers and what you might see on TV. Technology hasn't advanced to the point where we can eliminate head coaches and crew chiefs.
Exactly.
They still have a role in their
Yeah.
sports. So that in itself means that technology is a complementing tool for them to do their job. As that tool becomes sharper and it becomes more effective, they still have a role in it. We haven't been able to replace them. I don't see that we're going to replace them anytime soon. But these better tools just make their life a little easier. It gives them more bandwidth, more room to distribute the cognitive load. To be able to make more decisions more accurately. So much of being a crew chief, I've done that role. You're sitting on top of that pit box, and you've got, quite literally hundreds of decisions that you're going to have to deal with in a race, and a lot of times they all hit you at once, and you just get overloaded so quick that you have to pick and choose the right decisions to focus on to make. And you may, overlook or screw up other decisions because you just simply didn't have the bandwidth to consume all that.
Yeah.
As we get the tools better, the goal is to reduce that cognitive load so that you can kind of focus on a broader spectrum of decisions that you need to make and make, again, more correct decisions than wrong ones.
So what's your team's role on race day when it comes to conversing with Scott Graves or Matt McCall? I would imagine those guys ultimately are making the calls. They're making the final decisions out there. Are you there at the track? Are you back in Concord? What is happening from an analytic communication perspective to those guys on race day?
I traveled for 23 years. I'm kind of happy to say I don't travel anymore.
So you're back in Concord.
Yep. What I would tell you is that my team, I have two teams that report under me. I have an analytics group and I have a software development group, and they both support the race on Sunday. They're very much the groups behind the scenes. Nobody will ever hear about them. Nobody will ever see them in victory lane. But they're very instrumental in making sure that everything's flowing right. In the end, Scott and Matt, they make the final call on these decisions. They have that right. They're the crew chiefs. Our teams are providing them supporting information, in many times providing suggestions. My software team is making sure that all the data pipelines are flowing and that all the information that should be consumed or at least available to consume is working right. But between those two groups, they're kind of the business end or the back end, so to speak, of making sure that the teams on site have all those tools at their disposal to be able to call a good race and try to get us to victory lane.
I find this unbelievably interesting. I really do. I think, obviously this stuff, there's so much time, energy that gets spent into this, in the money that gets spent, the hours that get spent looking at it. And it's where we're at in the world. And it's only going to get more. I mean, it's only going to change and get more fine tuned, and the information's going to get that much more accurate, and it's going to be fast paced. And it's crazy to think what we've done in such a short amount of time and how it plays in to the actual competition that we see. So you obviously handle all these analytics, but what is a director of software? Give us an idea. Software used in NASCAR means what?
Means a lot of things. My team handles software sort of ubiquitously across the company. And what that really means is whether it's competition software, like a lot of the things we've been talking about here, the tools that the race teams are using to do their jobs, to make decisions about the performance of the car. Most, if not all of those tools are sort of custom built here at RFK.
Okay.
So
not everybody's using the same analytical stuff.
No.
Across the sport, it's all different.
The data feeds are the same.
Okay.
The raw data, for the most part, that's the same. In some small cases, teams are generating a little bit of data that's individual and unique to them. But for the most part, the data that we all consume is kind of consistent. It's what you do with that data. It's how you take that data and manipulate it and present it. is where a lot of the secret sauce is, so to speak. And so my software team, we're really focused on the competition side of the house, building those tools out to allow the teams to do their part. It goes beyond, just sort of, race strategy stuff. My team is working hard on vehicle dynamics, vehicle simulation. If you're not aware that vehicle simulation in NASCAR is a big thing, then you kind of have your head in the sand. It's pretty much drives everything in the sport these days, and so my team does that. That's the group of people that supports our race teams when they go to battle with simulation. Beyond that, there's an operational element to what our team does, and this is one that we've spent a lot of time focusing on this year. Getting the components of our assembly process and getting the different groups who touch various parts of the car in the assembly process, getting all that connected and communicating well. I've talked about this a few times in a few different settings. Where we used to live in this world was every group kind of had their own little workflow, and most of that was rooted in Microsoft Excel. And if you know anything about Microsoft Excel, particularly Excel from years past, you'll find that data just kind of lives in a silo. So the data is collected, but it lives on a spreadsheet on somebody's hard drive in a computer that's shoved over in the corner of the shop. And when you have 10 different computers that are collecting 10 different sets of information, but none of those computers are communicating with each other with that information, it's a lost opportunity to drive insight and efficiency throughout the company. And so it's one of the things that we set down the path on about 18 months ago was hey, we got to fix this. We've got to just sort of drop back and punt and really go after fixing these data silos. And so first step in that was recruiting, some good partners to come on board to help us with that, and we were able to find Tulip Interfaces as one partner, and Syspro ERP Systems is another, Faro Technologies another one. These are all RFK Tech Alliance partners. They were able to kind of bring their technology into the fold to help give us a starting spot to go build, and taking some of their work and then sort of mixing that in with our software development group. We've got an ecosystem out in the shop now that allows sort of proper communication from all of our groups to, as an example, if I have a part that comes in the door today, we can track that part all the way through its complete life cycle, and every time it goes on a race car, and every time it's collecting laps, and any time somebody touches it, we kind of have a full traceability of that part, and that's something that quite frankly just didn't exist 18 months ago.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
it really is. And a year from now you'll be talking about something that didn't exist then. I mean, it's wild. It's wild how the sport changes and how all the technology that goes into it changes. It's cool. I mean, it really is. This is the one sport where you will see the technology and how it makes a difference in the sport each and every year. There's no doubt. It's not like, the biggest and strongest guys. This is about, technology and teams that utilize it the best. And that's why I think it's so damn cool. It's such an interesting sport. Let's take a break. You got into the simulation side of it a minute ago, and I'm curious what goes into that from an accuracy perspective, because I think some of these tracks are super accurate. I know somebody was complaining about the Chicago track, how the simulation wasn't exactly up to snuff. And I'm curious what goes into that. So let's discuss that. This is really cool. Kevin Kidd, Analytics, Director of Software and Analytics at RFK. Stick around. It's Backstretch Banter with SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. We're back here on Backstretch Banter, SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. We have a big weekend of NASCAR coming up. We are coming off of the Bristol weekend, which is a bummer. Brad finished 26th, did not qualify for the round of 12. Buescher was in 14th. We'd like a better weekend. How about like 0.001 seconds faster than Larson this time would be nice. Kevin Kidd is our guest, who's a software guy, an analytics guy. He's the director of software and analytics, is his official title for RFK, former crew chief. As long as we're talking Kansas, how long, how many times, how much software did you use in the aftermath of round one after and I know people yell at me and they're like, no, we accept it. I just watched it again before the show because NASCAR tweeted it. We won that race. I'm sorry. You could not convince me. You could not convince me we weren't in front. But your thoughts, sir?
Boy. This is the crew chief talking to me now, or the competition director role that I used to hold. You can't dwell on those things. It'll drive you crazy. Mm-hmm. You just kind of have to accept them for how they unfold and move on and focus on the next race. It's super easy to look backwards in the sport and think what if or what could have happened. Any time that's consumed doing that keeps you from looking forward, which is really where your future progress and results lie. So, .001 sucks. I think we were all disappointed by it, but in the end, that's the way the cookie crumbled that day, and you just have to accept it and move on.
I guess I still don't, but it is what it is, right? I still protest and contest it. Kevin Kidd, our guest, who is the director of software and analytics at RFK. So you and I were talking about simulators a little bit ago, and they have become such a part of not just NASCAR, but everything, whether it is IndyCar racing, it's F1, wherever. I mean, everybody's doing it. Late model guys do simulations. How far have we come there, and how accurate are these things? Because everybody talks about it. For me as somebody who's not a driver, it's hard for me to believe that these things can prepare you when you're just not moving. You're not feeling the G-forces on your body. But give me an idea of why I'm wrong.
So first off, on this topic, I think it's worth saying that there's actually two forms of simulation that we use in the sport.
I didn't realize.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. And it's probably worth pointing out. We do have what we call driver in a loop simulator, and so that is what you just talked about. It's the full motion platform simulations that the driver hops in the car, and he goes through the process of driving the car just as he would out on the racetrack. Those things have certainly come a long way. My first exposure to one was probably at this point 12 or 13 years ago. First one that actually came into NASCAR. I was able to spend some time in it, and hey, it was an awesome tool back then. They're still great tools today. They get used now more than ever. They have improved dramatically. As with anything technology, the longer time goes on, you kind of you do sort of operate on this this curve where you go through rapid learning and rapid growth, and then things kind of fall down. But I don't think we're to that point where development's slowing down yet. I think things are still pretty wide open to improve. So those things have come from a point where drivers, especially experienced drivers, they didn't really like sitting in them because it just didn't give the same experience. And these guys, most of them didn't come from a video game world, and so it just wasn't that great for them. But what I would tell you now is that the technology has kind of come a long enough way to where even those experienced guys are now respecting the fact that the experience within the simulator is now more lifelike than ever, and they're starting to find value from it. So in my opinion, we probably just turned a corner on that part within the last 12 to 18 months. And,
oh, wow. So really recently.
Yeah, for sure. It's a recent development, and I would say that this is early days for that. I think that's only going to continue to get better. So whether you're racing NASCAR, F1, IndyCar, it doesn't matter. We're all using simulators, and I think we're all kind of on a similar trajectory in terms of what the experience is and how that's improving, what you can use the tool for and what you can't. I think that's just going to continue to get better. Now, I teased this, but let's talk about it. The second form of simulation, just real quickly, this other simulation that we use, our engineers sit at their desk, and they're able to run what we call offline simulations, where they basically put in setups and give it a track and give it conditions and hit go, and it will run kind of in an engineering approach. It will run simulations and spit out results relative to the metrics that are important to us for car development. So camber angles and dynamic wedge and dynamic nose weight and aero balance and all these kind of metrics, these KPIs that mean something to getting the car to perform right. Our engineers are able to sit at their desktops and do that. That's a large part of their job. And so that's kind of evolved to the point now where maybe when I got my start in it, it was a little bit of what I call point and shoot simulation, where you go in and type setup in, hit go, and run, and you get some results back. And now, quite literally, in preparation for a race weekend, we're literally running, hundreds of thousands of simulations for each event to collect data relative to the performance of the car, and then we have sort of mechanisms to summarize all that data so that you can draw insight from it. So anytime a car goes out on a racetrack, you can pretty much promise yourself that virtually that thing has been around the racetrack several thousand times.
That's crazy. That's interesting. That is, I think, something I didn't think about, and it's kind of cool. Again, like, we all think about growing up, if you're a certain age, and what NASCAR was, and the characters in it. And it's just the science of NASCAR. It's really, I think people always think about it as like a blue collar sport, and it is. But if you're a nerd who likes numbers and analytics, and I mean, this is the best. Like, it really is. There's so much science.
Yeah, I've told people this many times. If you're an engineer or a technologist and you like competition,
this is it.
This is where you belong. This is where it's at. It's the only place you can come as an engineer and go compete with other engineers and have it mean something. So it's, I suppose you could do it in fantasy football, but that's a little different.
What is yeah, that's true. That's true. What is your education? You said you were a crew chief. Did you go to college as an engineer? Did you pick things up on the fly as you worked? How do you, I know these jobs are relatively new, so how do you get into it?
Yeah. My path started a long time ago, so probably how you do it today is a little different than how I did it. But I got into the sport when engineering was just kind of really becoming a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm dating myself a little bit here, but I got in as a mechanical engineer. I went to Virginia Tech, got my mechanical engineering degree. Pretty much knew, from an early point that racing was the path I wanted to go down, and I determined that engineering was the way I was going to get there. It turned out to be right. I was able to kind of get on, with a team early on in my career, and spent some time engineering. Also spent some time, this sort of symptomatic of the day, I was a little bit of a mechanic back then as well. But kind of went through my career, kind of kept graduating to different roles. Ended up crew chiefing for handful of years, and then kind of got into team management and competition director and some of those roles, and now I'm leading a software team.
I love that, and what an evolution! And these jobs keep. Where do you think it's going? I know we're running out of time with you, but where do you think we go? Do you think 5 years from now the job is completely different? 10 years from now the job's completely different? Like, are we going to hit a plateau soon, or do you think there's a lot still to uncrack?
As long as the Amazons and the Googles and the Metas of the world keep working on developing new technologies and new tools and toys for us to go work on, and you've got the open AIs of the world and the Anthropics of the world doing their deal, this thing's just going to keep going. We're going to keep building tools, and we're going to keep driving insight more efficiently than what we have today. I mean, I can look into the future right now.
Are you using AI in NASCAR?
Well, you're kind of getting to the sensitive questions now.
Ah.
Let me just say that we look at all technologies. How's that for an answer?
Understood. Understood loud and clear. Kevin Kidd, Director of Software and Analytics for RFK Racing. Kevin, it's an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. I got to talk to you for another 5 days because I find this aspect of the sport to be so cool and so interesting, and just where we're at right now. The sport has changed. And like you said, if you're a competitive engineer, this is where you got to be. Kevin, thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
That's Kevin Kidd. Our good friend Thomas Burfield is going to hang out the rest of the show, content coordinator who puts this show on every single week. But we said, Thomas, it's time to be a star. We got to find out what he's up to, making RFK look good every week. We'll do that next right here on Backstretch Banter. All right, we're back here. It is Backstretch Banter on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. I'm your host, Chris Childers. It was awesome having Kevin Kidd on the show. I find that aspect of this business to be the most interesting because I think it's where the sport is going. I think technology and analytics and all of that are just going to get better and more mind-blowing, and God knows what it's going to look like in 10, 20, 40, 50, 100 years from now, but I guarantee you it's going to be cool, and it's going to blow our minds in the current. I'll tell you that. We got another great guest right now. In fact, this guy knows more about Backstretch Banter than I do, probably, because he runs the damn thing every week. Thomas Burfield is with us. You probably heard me say thank you to Thomas a million times at the end of the show when I thank him and Elijah Burke and Kevin Woods and Brandon Lee and all the stars back in Concord. But Thomas is the content coordinator for RFK. We said we want to have him on the show. He's a beautiful person. He's a star. We want to showcase his talent. So, Thomas, welcome to the other side of the show. How are you, pal?
I'm doing good, I always said that I went to college to get a degree to be behind the camera. So it's nice to be on the other side, but I kind of prefer the other side.
I get that. We'll make it as painless as possible. I promise you that. It will be over before you know it. I get that. You know, it's funny. I always say that I wish I was on the other side of the camera, but for whatever reason, I just decided to keep going on this side, and the anxiety that comes with it every day is real. But what the hell? It would be fun to kind of hide on the other side and still be a part of it. But it's good to have you. Thanks for toughing it out and braving it out and being on the show. So all I know about what you do for a living is what you do with me every week, which is the Backstretch Banter element of it. What is the content coordinator? What are you doing every day in Concord, sir?
A lot. I work hand in hand with Eli on the social media side of things, and as well as the partnership side of things of making videos and content for our sponsors and for social media to promote us and our lovely partners.
Social media is, I saw something on Instagram yesterday that made me chuckle. And it was a bunch of, business owners that are like, my gosh, every one of us now has to be a content creator. Every one of us now has to be able to attract eyeballs on social media. And that's where you and Eli factor into that. How do you become good at it? Is there a point in time where you just have to be like, all right, this might upset my soul at some point to be this much on social media, but we know we got to do it. I mean, how do you get so into the social media game professionally? I'm curious.
That's a really good question. I think you kind of answered it there. You just have to spend time on the apps and find what's going viral. I mean, half the ideas that I pass on to Eli or Eli passes on to me come from what we see on social media. So it's a little bit of, copy pasting, but trying to put our own unique spin on it. As far as like for when I started to, I've always been into videos and making videos. I've done that since I was in middle school, and it was just something that I love to do, and I kept carrying it out. And I've always followed sports as a kid, so I tried to marry the two together and got into sports production, and somehow along the road end up in NASCAR.
That's pretty wild. How did NASCAR become the thing? How was NASCAR? Was it something that was on your radar? Was it something that was new? I mean, how did it become your life?
So, no, I knew nothing about NASCAR. Nothing. Before coming here.
Really?
Yeah, and it was funny. I actually not didn't like it, but I just didn't know anything about it, and so I had the same stigma as everyone else, which is it's just a bunch of rednecks going around in circles. And then
really, I'm shocked by this.
Yeah, no, I was yeah, and so when I applied for this job, and they're like, what do you know about NASCAR? I was like, I think I've watched Talladega Nights once. And they're like, that's great, but that's actually a bad representation of the sport. So it was a lot of fun to come in here, and kind of like you said with Kevin Kidd, where it's just, there's so much more to the technical aspect of it than just bolting a car together and throwing it on the racetrack. So it was weird because I didn't even know anything about motorsports before coming into NASCAR. And ironically, I watched Ford versus Ferrari right before I got accepted here. And I was like, man, this stuff's really cool. And then
yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I got here, and the next thing I know, I was watching F1, I was watching supercars in Australia, like all this stuff, and it's now a very important part of my life that I cherish.
So I like to fight with people that because there is that old stigma about it being the redneck sport that people would just go left, and I think shows like South Park have added into that and given people fuel to make fun of people like us. And yet I think it's the most scientific sport. I think it's actually the smartest sport. You live it, you see it. I mean, how nuanced is what you see every day?
It's insane. I mean, you go to the track every week, and every car has to go through a technical inspection, and it's like, okay, what does that mean? And it's like, well, they go and they check the underbody of the car. Then they check the individual components of the shocks, the tires. Is it in spec? Does it weigh enough? Does it weigh too much? All these different things. And then the final step, it goes through this Hawkeye scanner. And Hawkeye is crazy because it scans the car and it measures up to 1,000th of an inch. The tech guys might get me wrong here, but I think it's 1,000th of an inch of of tolerance of where you can have the race car body, and learning all about that aspect of it, and it's so far from just bolting a car together that it's bewildering.
I love it, and I think it's so cool. I think it is amazing when things come together and victory lane is had. What has that been like for you as somebody who had no idea what this was like to see your team win, to understand now the amount of people that are working on this, the amount of people that are trying to promote the team, the amount of people that are working on all different levels, whether it's hospitality, whatever it is, to make the team go round every single week. When a win happens, for people that have no idea what this feels like, for you that have no idea what it felt like, what's it feel like?
It's crazy. So I'll take a step back and say that I was lucky in a way that I was around for RFR Racing, and I spent about 6 or 7 months as an employee of Roush Fenway Racing. And I can tell you that the two companies of Roush Fenway Racing and Roush Fenway Keselowski have been completely separate.
Really?
Yeah, I really enjoyed RFR Racing, and it was a very cool atmosphere. But at RFK Racing, you talk about going to victory lane. It's like I had that 6 to 7 months of, we haven't been good for 10 years or so on and so forth, right? We've not reached victory lane one way or another. And then to go to victory lane, I was lucky enough to be in Bristol when Chris won in 2021. And there's not a feeling like it. It's insane. It's funny because you start to get so used to the feeling of not winning that when it gets close and, things are starting to wind down. I mean, Chris had the lead for, I think it was like 50 or 60 laps. And that entire 60 laps, you're sitting there, just hands are sweating, your heart's beating out of your chest. You're the same way as the guys who build the car because, you love these cars as much as those guys. Obviously, they put more labor of love into it.
Yeah.
But just the feeling when they go across the line, and now, especially in Watkins Glen, you just kind of get into a zone of, I have to, like, I feel my position is an honor or privilege, right? Because I get to tell the story of the win. I get to tell the story of RFK Racing and push it out to the audience. And so you kind of get into this mode of, okay, we won. I can put that to the side for a second and then grab my camera, hit record, and get the moment. So it's really cool.
It is cool. And I think the job you guys do is admirable. I love it. I think you have one of the best, you and Eli do one of the better jobs in NASCAR of getting the message across, doing it in a fun way, doing it in a way where I think fans kind of relate with it in a real way, in a fun way, which is kind of cool. Is there anything that you've done where Brad or somebody, Kevin, have been like, dial it back? Is there anything you thought of that was you thought it was brilliant and they were like, I don't know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There has been, but I will say I will give credit to both Steve Newmark and Kevin Woods and say they let us play in a very large sandbox. And so
Nice.
The times that we take it too far, both me and Eli, are very few and far between. So those times when it does happen, you kind of look at it later and you're like, yeah, that was
Shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. But
Shouldn't have done that.
But it's a lot of fun.
The sandbox has been very big, and you guys have done a beautiful job with it. How often do the sponsors try to be a part of what you're doing on a daily basis, or is that just your job to make sure you include them, or is there a collaboration going on?
I will say that has definitely ramped up as we've gotten further into RFK. It was still a part of RFR, but as we've started to kind of make our own vision and our own have our own voice per se. Yes, partners have definitely wanted to be a part and kind of have their own have us promote them in a way that makes sense with our voice. And so I will applaud Eli for kind of trying to convince the partners and tell them that, hey, if you just put your brand out there and just give us a copy and give us, a picture, whatever it may be, and say, just post it, it's not going to be as impactful as if we create a piece of content, a custom piece of content around it. And so it's they definitely want to be a part of our voice.
No doubt. Thomas Burfield is our guest. He is the content coordinator at RFK Racing, and he just a handful of years in the motorsports business, and now he is absolutely into it. He is old expert, and you would think that he's been around it his whole life, which I love that. I love that you're one of those guys that had no idea, and now it's a part of your DNA. And I was one of those people growing up that grew up in Chicago, where it took a lot of my family who loved NASCAR to work on me for years, because I was just like, I'm a football guy, I'm a basketball guy. Then you go to a race and you're like, okay, I get it. Let's go back. I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's infectious, and once you get the bug, oh my gosh, it consumes.
It's bad.
It consumes you. Oh, it just gets you. We got more with Thomas Burfield. Let's talk Bristol. Certainly disappointing this past weekend. Looking ahead to Kansas, I know from a content perspective, there's a lot you could do leading up to Kansas. I'm curious what the strategy will be. We'll talk about that next right here on Backstretch Banter with RFK Racing. We're back here, Backstretch Banter, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio, Channel 90. Thomas Burfield is our guest. I'm Chris Childers. Thomas is the content creator at RFK, and they got a lot of content they're working on this weekend as we go to Kansas. And for those that pay attention to the sport, the last time RFK went to Kansas, it was an interesting end of the race and an interesting return home. They say it was the closest race in the history of NASCAR, and I still to this day attest that Chris won. But Thomas, what are we doing? What is our strategy for Kansas this week with the 17 and the 6?
Throwing the last Kansas race away and trying to forget anything.
Not even paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Not even bringing it up.
No, I mean, I know.
Okay.
I think Eli today put out, or yesterday, or sometime recently, he put out a tweet that was blocking all of these certain keywords on Twitter, and I guess I should say X, of Larson and Busher, Busher close finish, like blocking all of that stuff because it's you get really connected to the sport and you see something like that happen, and I mean you talk about things you have to delete. I was the one who, when Busher crossed the line and they announced him the winner, I sent the tweet that said Busher was the winner, and it got a little bit viral in terms of people saying, RIP to the Roush admin and everything, and I just remember saying that and being like, oh, that's terrible, absolutely terrible.
Yeah. Everything about that day was terrible. So hopefully this one's going to be wonderful. I
Amen.
Get throwing that one in the trash. From a sponsorship perspective, we got some cool ones this weekend on the cars, and I think this year, what I love about the sponsorships is that not only certainly are they helping the team financially, but they're cool, they're useful, they're functional sponsors when it comes to Fastenal and Castrol. And hell, there's nothing cooler than Build Submarines. Anything cool activation-wise, content-wise this week?
Yeah, so we do have quite a bit going on this week. First, we actually just released a complete shop tour on YouTube and all our social media, talking about how our shop is run and how Fastenal has made us better at making our shop more efficient, and it's part of a 3-part series that we'll release, and this is part 1. But it's kind of our own unique behind the scenes tour of our shop. Additionally, we have Solomon Plumbing on the car on the 6th, so that'll be pretty cool. They don't have a lot of social media activation, but they love to activate at the track, so I'm sure we'll see them there and have all sorts of fun content ideas there when we get to the track this weekend.
What was it like watching Bristol unfold for everybody else that doesn't work on the car, that doesn't, I mean, you're obviously sitting there like everybody else. You want to see this thing keep going. You want to see Brad in the top 12. He started, I think, in the 12th spot when the playoffs started, and 3 weeks in a row just had some really bad luck and couldn't get, where he needed to be by the end of it. So now a championship is not on the table anymore. What is it like in the shop in Concord? And give us an idea of how the attitude is now moving forward the rest of the year.
It's definitely a little deflated, rightfully so, right? We didn't have the year we expected to have, especially coming off of last year, but it's still very optimistic. I think next year is going to be a pretty big year for us, and it's kind of a little bit of retooling and preparing for the run for the championship next year, because I can tell you right now that the guys who feel that they've had some bad luck this year are going to want to have some good luck next year. So they're going to do everything they can to take luck out of the way.
Well, we got some good luck last year at times, and this year there's been zero luck. So of good luck, there's been a bad luck, but there's been no good luck. So maybe a nice healthy balance next year, and
the law of averages,
and everything can work out. We can get in victory lane and earn our way in, and no 0-0-0-0-1 crap or none of that. It's just clean. It's beautiful. That is the goal, certainly moving forward. Brad's reaction when he's a part of the names on the team, what was his reaction like in the aftermath from a team morale perspective? What did he say to everybody, or did he?
He was, I think he's the same way, right? He's a little, let down at the fact that we didn't make the round of 12 and, will not continue our run for the championship. But he's very aware of the fact that, this is a program that is supposed to be taking steps. And we took a pretty big step last year, certainly bigger than a lot of people thought we were going to take. So I think it's a bit of, hey, you know, we might have taken a small step back this year, maybe, but there's still, you know, stairs to be climbed. So we'll continue to keep digging on that.
All right, Mr. Burfield, you enjoy the race this weekend, my friend. We got to say thank you to you, of course, for producing it, and Eli helping out, Mr. Burke. We thank Brandon Lee and Kevin Woods just because we have to. No, I'm kidding. They're wonderful. And Alec Walt, our producer in DC, who puts it together every week. We appreciate his hard work. Yes, absolutely. Thomas, you're a stud. Let's get a win this week, even though we're not in the chase. It would be nice, huh?
Amen. Yes. I'm all for
nice
it.
Indeed. We are done. It is Backstretch Banter with RFK, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. Thank you for listening, everybody, for Thomas Burfield and for Kevin joining us earlier. Enjoyed that conversation. I'm Chris Childers, and we'll see you next time on Backstretch Banter.